Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. While my country succumbs under the fascist yoke, I find myself unable to unglue my eyes from the daily notices of the latest haphazard atrocities and foibles committed by this regime. And so I am not doing any reading at all. My reading has stopped, which is a very bad thing for a booktube channel. So this channel is reclaiming its roots a little bit in that I'm spending more time devoted to reading poetry. And lately, I have embarked upon a project of reading from all of my books in sequence. That is, all of my books which I have, in one form or another, gotten through the self-pub process. I have others which I did not. Some works, when you finish them, you feel such an intense revulsion, you just file them away and never look at them again. In other cases, though you feel something of that revulsion, you go ahead and rush them into print. So I am going to be reading something from the Requiem, which is a big poem. But let me give you a little introduction. This was written in 1998, so it's going to be 30 years old pretty soon. I've done previous videos talking about the previous books. Now, they were not published in the order in which they were written. My first book was Embodiment and Release. Covers just about all of the poetry I wrote up until age 30 or thereabouts, a little less, a little more, I don't know. All that I wrote and what of that I considered salvageable. It is a good place to start. And it was published under the imprint of Non-Fit Press, as were my first 5 books, because this was in a day before print on demand existed, and I was trying to make a go of it as a legitimate publisher. It did not go all that well, I guess you could say, but there is not a great market for poetry. Now, it went well enough for me for a lot of other reasons, but I don't need to go into that. The second book was a book of sonnets. So I will put links in the description box to me reading from either of these books or each of these books, both of these books. Sorry, I get very confused when I speak. And the last video I did was about the soul's refinement. This was, it is almost, it's about 180 pages, I think. Yeah, 180 pages of longer poems. And at some point in the course of this, I felt a sort of spiritual coming together, like I had accomplished something in regards to my poetics. And I've never quite known exactly what that was, but I had the feeling of a circle having been completed, almost like an energy circle, and made very strong. I think that meant that I was ready to take the next step and tackle an epic poem. Now, this is not really an epic. It is 404 pages long. And that is how I looked at the time. And I do not recall feeling any particular revulsion when I finished this, my fourth book. I felt I was done with writing poetry at that point, and I retired for, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. But looking at it now, these, I don't know, 27 years later, and trying to pick out something to present for you, I find an awful lot in here that is absolutely cringe-worthy. Both for the prosody and for the content. Be that as it may, it is not the poet's job to critique his own work in such a way. And I have not had to spend much time with this in the intervening time. I generally, whether I get something out in publication or not, I do not dwell upon the past. I just move forward. Interestingly, the video in which I touched upon the soul's refinement, I read the first 6 or 7 poems in the book. So I didn't pick and choose, I just went from the beginning. And there was one line, and actually one of my viewers, occasional viewers, a booktuber, Richard, he has a very nice history channel. He left a comment basically quoting a line which I'm going to say maybe resonated a little bit with him. And that line was, "For what I am is never what I wanted, but be a simple boy, thoughtless, undaunted." And the next line, which he did not point to, is what I want to draw your attention to. "Prisoner to my thoughts I seem to be, too all wrapped up in mental pain to lend a hand of consolation, such as we but hope to see our life's poor pittance end." So when I was reading this, and I meant to comment on it, but then I just went ahead without it, the thought occurred to me as those words tripped across my tongue, that "prisoner to my thoughts I seem to be" does not anymore apply in my life. I have occasionally referred to the verse I write as a scaffolding, sort of trying to help prepare me for the future. And in this case, it certainly functioned in such a way. And I am no longer the person who wrote these words at all, though there is, as I think T.S. Eliot said, some kind of relationship between myself and the man who wrote them. So, just flipping through this thing, trying to find something to read, as I say, I felt many a cringe. And so I decided that I will fall back on a section that was one of my favorites when I wrote it. Not when I look at my own poetry, I do not judge it in terms of quality. I don't say this is good, this is not good. If I feel anything special to a verse that I write, it is for some kind of external reason. So the book, as one might expect, takes something of the form of a journey to the underworld, a pretty common theme in epic poetry. This is not really an epic, I have said. But in one scene, I encounter the historian Moses Finley. This is a book which he wrote, one of his last books, I think, but the first one of his which I read. I've read most of his books, multiple times even, and they have been a great help to me in sort of setting my foot upon the currents of time as recorded in history. I got my sea legs through reading M.I. Finley discussing history, historical method, the use and abuse, or uses and abuses of history, so to speak, which is quoting one of his titles. I think they are both referenced in here. So in this scene, I encounter the shade of M.I. Finley, and so this passage, even from the beginning, always meant something special to me, simply because I am acknowledging in verse my great, great debt to the ancient historian. He wrote primarily about ancient Greece and then primarily about classical Athens, though he covered more than that, and he did touch upon Rome here and there as well. So, with such a heavy early focus on the works of M.I. Finley, I think my viewpoint on history was a little bit skewed, and in later years I have tried to branch out and find other historians. It turns out that there are other historians, and plenty of them, who write pretty well and can be trusted. The thing is, you have to learn how to evaluate a work of history. And his writing certainly helped me in that regard. So I will read a bit from the 8th canto. This is going to be a long haul. I'll read it from the start, which makes reference to the work, the Bhagavad Gita, a work of Hindu spirituality. I believe it's included somehow in the epic poem, the Mahabharata, but I do not know the greater work, but I know the Bhagavad Gita pretty well, and knew it better when I was younger. So there are some references here. Lord, as Arjuna went, although afraid, into the fray, so let me now proceed into my destiny. These words I said silently to myself, so to be freed from all the doubts and fears which must impede love's progress. I had slept. Arjuna was afraid not for himself, for he did lead all men in bravery, but for, alas, the bitterness to see he knew must come to pass. Lord, there between opposing factions he discoursed, and thou in Krishna so advised that he not act unmanly, rather be not by appearances as hypnotized. For those his friends, relations, whom he prized, whom he must slay and watch be slain, as even the battle must begin, as though disguised already had dispatched been unto heaven or hell, discoursed within that chariot so driven. I thought about Gandhari's curse upon the Lord and of his blessing unto her after the awesome battle had been done on Kurukshetra's plain, whereby none were spared of tremendous loss that did occur to all, as women now come to inhearse their dead, the corpses scattered everywhere. In wake of battle that could not be worse. And Krishna said, "Behold, Queen, I accept your curse." After the curse had come to pass, and death found Krishna, when a hunter had mistaken the Lord to be a deer, and from its sheath dispatched the fatal arrow, as one shaken is blessed by Krishna, whose life he has taken. Even so, afterwards, Arjuna, brave, his strength without the Lord cannot rewaken, as heroes from the war, long past, now have their Himalayan journey, each meeting his grave. Now all have fallen by the road, except for Yudhisthira, with his canine friend, now at the topmost peak, who will accept no ride from Indra, who, making pretend the dog an unclean beast, may not ascend into the heavens, has enjoined the king his faithful friend away from him to send. But he, the king, will not, although it bring his forfeiture of heaven, so his love does cling. Even as now the dog transforms into Dharma himself, the God of righteousness, so even, Lord, in everything we do, our willingness to love counts for no less. Lord, like Arjuna, let me now progress into the fray, no matter that I keep no part of me unchanged. O Father, bless me in my journey, though I journey deep, and though the tears of bitterness my eyes must weep. So saying, I had traveled but a scant distance from where I slept, when opposite the stream I see a place, the which I want to enter. There a gate on which is writ, the grove of scholars. But so rusty it appears few people travel there. I see the same phrase is translated in Sanskrit, in Latin, in Chinese. It seems to be written in every tongue and most unknown to me. There is a bridge ahead that brooks the stream, and so I take it to the other side, because I feel it proper to esteem good scholarship, though I dare not to hide my ignorance as one the light denied. But there is one I want to meet therein, merely to pay respects, who was a guide in many books profound and genuine, of scholarship sublime, though I am not his kin. The wooden gate upon its axle creaks, perhaps because I notice it, the frame is slightly out of plumb, producing squeaks as I push it. But would it squeak the same if others as myself, unlettered, came, if only to bestow our just respects to those whose work our just respects can claim? The soul its own society selects, though with him seen before, my rude heart most connects. Startled as by the creaking that so long has gone unsounded, one comes up to me as though he almost thinks there's something wrong, then asks if there is someone I would see. Out in the verdant grove, full thronged there be so many persons peacefully conversing, here and there, to and fro, all happily coming and going, gathering, dispersing, doing what scholars do, amongst themselves discoursing. He takes me by the hand, this patient man, who gatekeeper has been at Scholars' Grove for eons. Like a kind librarian, he takes me to a grassy knoll above the rest in elevation, where a Jove, carved out of marble finer than Carrara's, glowers above the crowd, through whom we move, the whole arena like a pleasant terrace, with garlands decorated, tapestries and arras. He whom you seek is there, then goes to see if he can interrupt the conversation two men hold standing now in front of me, making a gesture to me. Trepidation wells in my heart that one of my low station should come to seek a word with one so great, though just to pay respects my motivation has been, to tell him I appreciate his conscientious work, which none can ever hate. He comes to me, and I apologize, saying, Sir Moses, please forgive me for the interruption of your soul so wise, from it your conversation. I implore you, please forgive that one inferior in scholarship, as I myself concede, should come to see you as a visitor. Greatly I'm honored and pleasured indeed to make your soul's acquaintance. So my words proceed. And he, my boy, there isn't any need for excess courtesy. We're all the same who have crossed over. There is no stampede of visitors for me, nor is there shame in your approaching me, nor further blame in your poor scholarship, as to belittle yourself. For students unified in aim, there's none superior, though some recital may make of their accomplishments. Forbear the title. And I come to books an ignorant, as one who only learns but with reluctance, being poetic wholly in my slant, who at a time when I met with obstructions blocking my path, turned to you for instructions, rather to any book with M.I. Finley upon its binding, and with no compunctions I turned, if comprehending only thinly, as into study of the past I did begin me. As one so wholly ignorant, I needed to know what evidence and models there existed, lest I take a story seeded by someone and one finds them everywhere, for whose distortions I don't really care, nor trust, lest in their pomp they pull the wool over my eyes, and I, as unaware, heed them uncritical, without a tool whereby I might protest, thereby unwitting fool. I read that I might not be gullible to all the false distortions of the past, the use and misuse, as your words did tell of history, which ever is recast to fill our present needs, the which, when past, it is recast again. Your careful thought showed me the way, because there is a vast supply of information, how one ought evaluate, assess, lest they be wrongly caught. And he, all scholarship, all words are biased. This I but tried to show. Yet I retain for all of my forebears, teachers, the highest esteem from all of them, from all of whom our thought can gain, as we in our self-efforts our minds train to sculpt our own awareness, our own view. Then all our scholarship will not be vain, but insomuch that people, not a few, prefer to be spoon-fed, there's little we can do. And your area of expertise is denigrated greatly since you left the world, a decade now since your decease, though we remaining have not been bereft, your insight and your knowledge, cautious, deft, as left us in your books. For people feel Hellenic studies in themselves a cleft against an understanding of the real history of the world, propounding it with zeal. He doesn't have a good ledge here. And he, I make no claim that what I chose to spend my life investigating has innate superiority. But those who try to paint that Athens merely was refurbished Egyptologies amass critical errors in the multitudes in forwarding their theses, if because the picture they present so much excludes of actual evidence with them which nor colludes. Athens has claimed so much attention, not because she was a better city-state, all others worthy but to be forgot, but rather as she left behind a great surplus of texts, which her story relate in depth, detail, and with divergent views, which scholarship, forgive me if I prate, as one of many tools prefers to use, of all available, the hardest to refuse. Similarly, said he, ideas which were given birth in Athens have devolved into the modern usage they enrich without an interruption, problems solved, or with which Athens early was involved, but failed to solve, we see within her framing. Unfortunate to some, no less absolved respect for evidence in their disclaiming. But that is politics, not any names I'm naming. And there is a wealth of scholarship of sundry climes that has begun to burgeon. But I am fearful lest our standards slip, with so much new authority emerging in fields of study that had long been virgin. World scholarship inquiry has risen, yet carefully as we would choose a surgeon, we must historians, lest their misprison, their sloppy scholarship, no less construct a prison. And I always tried to make it clear how much was known, from whence I had derived my arguments, or when I'd made a mere guess from the silence. That which is received may have been falsified or misconceived no less than any other source. We must be critical that we be not deceived, regurgitating stories we can't trust, perhaps for our agendas, which may not be just. And so far from any kind of standard, critical apparatus all dismissed, have our inquirers and scholars wandered, that your authority indeed is missed, and your sagacity, which did resist the specious argument from every corner, while scholars now adumbrate but a list of what they've read, of things culled the adorner, without new synthesis, our world is much the mourner. And I didn't publish much in youth, but tried to learn my subject. Those few books that I have left behind all tell the truth as best I knew it. With hindsight, one looks and finds some facts were wrong, some right by flukes. But it's the model overall that matters. Conception, synthesis, while our rebukes leveled against the past, the future scatters, even if for the present our rebuking flatters. I sought the truth, and sought the truth with honor, though from my native home I was an exile. Of talents that God gave me, I was donor to my chosen profession, if the while I wrote in what was called a lucid style. It came from stating my obscurities within the open light, not using wile to cover that I was perplexed, and he's someone I owe a great debt to, Thucydides. He pointed to the man with whom he had priorly been conversing, for within the realm of souls we lose the false facade, the trappings that we wore, the clothes, the skin, and are all naked, save the blots of sin that we've acquired in our earthly life, with marks of goodness such as we may win in loving one another, husband, wife, friend, parent, child, and stranger, in good times or strife. I asked him to excuse me, that I must continue on my way. He gave me thanks for visiting with him, though, to be just, I was the benefiter. Then the ranks of those whose scholarship so well outflanks that of a poet, I humbly departed, reminding myself that money in banks is worth less than good scholarship. I started along my path again, refreshed, renewed, light-hearted. A man of erudition such as him need not be such that seems to condescend, and he of scholars is my paradigm, without a need to falsify, pretend. His presence made me feel at ease, a friend, and I determined, if I had a choice, I'd rather, if a soul can so intend, take kinship there with him, but my small voice casts no determinations, save in God rejoice. Further along the stream, as I continued to make headway, although I am a man, since having slept in courage freshly sinewed, I moved not as a soul without elan, but thoroughly invigorated. An occasion unexpected was my meeting with Moses Finley. As I forward scan, my eyes far off observe what for a fleeting instant appears to be a theater stage entreating. Indeed, as my proximity begins to narrow, then I notice that a stage has been erected, whence actors evince in mask roles to some farce, as they engage in wild gesticulations, badinage, all kinds of horseplay, while an audience observes, but not sedately, sullen, sage, but rather raucous and rambunctious, whence I feel delighted by their joy's sweet innocence. Suddenly, now the scene becomes intense, as one upon the platform, in the mask of motherhood, beyond all common sense, has grabbed a knife in center stage to bask, playing hysteria, then to the task of stabbing it into what represents babies proceeds, and then there ends the mask. The audience applauds, applause relents, and now they start to go. So many innocents. Shakespeare, I say, I recognize your face to one who is before me. So that's just an excerpt from the big epic, the big would-be epic. It did not quite succeed. It is not, I think, a book that I recommend you to start with of my works or urge you to read regardless. It was a necessary step along the way. The next book which I will feature, when I finished that, it was a big ordeal. I think I was wasted for a month or two. I can't remember any longer, but it was a very intense writing process. In many ways, more so than this, which many of you got to witness firsthand as I was posting these poems, as they were created in real time, posted on my YouTube channel. If you go back to anything I posted in March, April, May, I think, possibly even February, I'm not sure. I think March, April, May. You will probably find one of the poems in that book. This was so intense, it destroyed me. And I thought with that I had said everything that I needed to say. Now, just with this little glancing into it that I've done, I am glad that I did not stop there. I am hoping that stuff which has come after has perhaps fared better with time than that did. I did do another sort of epic, more closely tuned to the definitions of epic 5 years later, so that would be about 22 years ago. And I had meant to bring it to show you, but I guess I forgot to carry it with me. it will be forthcoming regardless. Do not worry. Um, Actually, it was a funny thing. I wrote these in 4 notebooks, and when I started, I had a very different idea in mind, and tried writing, but the muse was not with me. So I wound up with, I don't know how many pages of just dead stuff, just terrible. And then one day, instead of writing the poem that I wanted to write, I just on a lark, on the spur of the moment, I decided to write what the muse wanted me to write, and I did, and this came out a work wholly different in every respect to what I had envisioned. And the muse took me all the way through to the end. And sadly, later on, I took those notebooks and cut out those first pages of bad stuff. Now I understand there is no shame, as I said in a previous video, in one's juvenilia, in one's bad poems written in childhood, in one's mistakes. It's all necessary steps, and there is no shame that should make one not want them to be seen. And I regret it because 5 years later, then when I came to write that second big poem, large poem, even larger than the 404 pages here, it was, regardless, more closely attuned to what had been my idea those 5 years previous than I could have guessed. I think the sort of like that biblical tale where God asks the guy to kill his son. It's a horrible tale from any kind of a reality, but as a metaphor, it's very apropos. The muse did not want me to write the thing that I had in mind. What is it? You have to kill your lovelies or something. There's some kind of goofy saying about that. And I kept my faith with the muse. This came out, and I will never read it at this point. I know, as I say, the passage about Moses Finley is heartwarming to me because Moses Finley himself, the man, the writer, meant and continues to mean so much to me. I thought I was done with writing and planned not to write anymore. In fact, the final line of the poem is well, I'll read the last stanza. No, I won't. I'll just read the last For I returned unto the world of men, to suffer dearth, despair, or deprivation, so God may will. But joy surpassing can, as I a poet was, but now have ceased my pen. So I did. I lay my pen aside. And then that was February of 1998 to February of 99 to February of 1000. So that's, On September 11th, 2001, planes flew into the World Trade Center towers, and America's world changed. And immediately there was a rush to capitalize on the disaster. The disaster was broader than just those two buildings, which was large enough of a tragedy, don't get me wrong, but there were other buildings involved. But right off, political forces came to the fore in order to capitalize upon the tragedy, and that has set the country on this course, which has led to the fascist regime which we now have, trying to yoke us into submission. I don't believe we are completely lost as yet. But with that, you may recall the president at the time was George W. Bush. He had been reading a children's book to some grammar schoolers at the time, some member of his employ, some member of the executive branch walked in and whispered in his ear, and then he continued reading the story. But that was when he received knowledge of what had transpired, that the first tower had fallen. And because he was a man of little character to begin with, and because I suppose he had looked so foolish, he decided to go the easiest route and gin up, I think is how you would say it, gin up the anger of his citizenry, of our citizenry. He felt and proposed the theory which the Republican Party still operates under, that becoming angry is a show of strength. And so he wanted to pound his chest and appear like a man of some weight, some strength, some heft of moral purpose, and so forth, none of which he was. You know, I should have pulled down, even though this is unrelated. I wasn't even thinking about this. My book, Cool Pose, just a little bit of sociology about the African American community in this country. And now things come into place much more when we see how the citizenry, and particularly the white citizenry of this country, have gone off the deep end, so to speak. That this false ideal that becoming angry and losing control of one's emotions, one's words, etc., signifies some kind of strength. This notion must be delegitimized immediately. I mean, I have often thought of a country like Thailand, where they have the concept of Mai Pen Rai. It's when you deal with something and you do not lose your cool. And many cultures, most traditional cultures, have some sort of idea like that. But we have no need to look abroad for anything like that. Right here in our original citizens, that is to say, Black American descendant of slaves, we have right available for everybody to see. This idea of keeping one's cool, that is a more sophisticated mental framework with which to approach the various vicissitudes of life. And somehow, while temporary political gain was achieved by the Republican Party by continually or continuously, I think continually is the one with interruptions, is that right? But continuously is the one with no, there has been no interruptions. By espousing this ideal of getting angry, though they have won political advantage all across the country, we are now seeing the downside of that and are facing much greater losses. So, I will leave off here. I have not decided if next session I will solely devote myself to this. This book is another Slimmy, and to read the whole thing aloud in its entirety, I think would take a half hour. So I'm possibly thinking of combining this with its successor in the chronology, a book titled Fascist Heart, which looked ahead to the rise of fascism in this country in a very oblique way. So I may do that. It's also a Slimmy. Initially, when I began this series, I was thinking of completing it with reading something or other from this book, Against Fascism, my last book. If there were something that felt relevant to me, I would do so, but so far it doesn't seem that it's a good mix. I recommend you to go to my Lulu page, which I will put a link to in the description box, and possibly consider picking up a book or two. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.